Hello, hi, good evening. Assalamu alaikum. My name is Zohaib Qamar. Thanks for joining us today for a virtual career hour. Today, our topic is going to be entrepreneurship and careers in entrepreneurship. And our guest speaker is Abdul Rahman. And I'll turn it over to him to kind of just introduce himself and just share a little bit about yourself, maybe a fun fact, a little bit about your career path.
Yeah, assalamu alaikum. Thank you, Brother Zohaib, for putting this together. First, I want to thank Masjid, Hamza, Muslim Youth Mentors, for doing this session every Friday. I think this is very important for our community. We need professional growth. We need networking opportunities. And basically, we need to connect with each other and help each other with our career paths and our success. So speaking on my behalf, currently I'm a vice president at Bank of New York Mellon. I work in the hedge fund space, managing a risk team on multi-asset, portfolios. A fun fact about myself, I like to think I'm an amateur surfer. I got into surfing a few years ago. In my teens, or early teens, I was an avid swimmer. I was part of the diving team. So then naturally I wanted to get more into, surfing, and hopefully one day I'll become professional.
Oh, thank you, Abdul, for that brief introduction. Definitely appreciate it. And then, so today our topic is going to be entrepreneurship. So maybe at a basic high level, can you speak about what is entrepreneurship, what it means? People define it different ways. People have like grand interpretations of what it means. Someone says, I'm an entrepreneur. What does that mean in simple English? Can you give us some basic background?
So an entrepreneur, like as you said, there's variations of what people consider or interpret what an entrepreneur is. An entrepreneur, at its most basic form, takes a problem in this world and develops a solution. That's how, when you see all these startups that that have risen and that have been created, they found a problem and they developed a solution. And how do you develop a solution? Well, through innovativeness, through technology, through different understanding, communication, connections. These are solve this problem. But ultimately, I tell everybody who's interested in starting their own, their own startup, an entrepreneur, find the problem. That's number one. And then the path of being able to create a solution, that's your startup.
Perfect. No, that's really good background on the basics of what is entrepreneurship. And then what we usually discuss for other types of fields are there subfields within this field, right? So within entrepreneurship, you have the people, an individual who's going to solve a problem, create a company or a product or a business. What are other fields related to entrepreneurship that people are like, I might not be ready to open up my own business, but what else can I do within this space that could be a career path for me? Do you have anything like that you could tell us about?
Absolutely. The beauty about entrepreneurship is that it touches upon every single field, whether it's healthcare, technology, business, accounting, art, you name it. It's all about the mindset. The entrepreneurial mindset touches all these fields, because when you're working in these industries, working in these professions, you're trying to innovate, add value to the company or to the firm, right? So you're thinking about these out-of-box solutions. Now, in career paths, what I can say, it's not one-to-one. I can't say like, an entrepreneur, okay, you're an entrepreneur, and then this is, your career path that you can take. However, I can say there is tons of tangible skills that you gain as an entrepreneur that can, help you leverage to a further career. I'll give an example, right? As an entrepreneur, you have to be a leader. If you're leading the company, you have to have those leadership skills, those managerial skills, those organizational skills. Those are transferable skills when you go to different roles, especially if you're applying for more of, a higher level position. It's all, how do you leverage your skills as an entrepreneur if you're trying to get back into the career path? There's different avenues on that.
Okay, perfect. So what's it like to be an entrepreneur? So on a day-to-day basis, someone says someone's an entrepreneur. What is that going to look like? Is it going to be the same for every person who has their own business and has their own product and is out there problem solving? Or will it look differently? Is there standard hours? Like people who are CPA, they're like, oh yeah, we usually work 10 hours, 12 hours during busy season, but during the regular hours, we work 8 hours. Is there a set like number of hours for an entrepreneur or a set day to day that they can expect?
So what you mentioned, I'll take that. So as an accountant, you have busy season, right? During busy season, between January and May, depending on the client, that's a time when you're putting in between 80 to 100 plus hours a week, right? For an entrepreneur, it's busy season all year round. If you're an entrepreneur, you're raising this company from scratch. It is always busy season for you. In terms of hours, I can say there's no definite. There's no like, okay, I'm going to work 9 to 5. That's not going to happen. You're not an entrepreneur if that's your mindset. Your mindset, I'm going to work all day long until I feel I've accomplished everything for this day, and then tomorrow I'm going to do the same thing.
Okay. So for people who don't have a background of entrepreneurship, can you share a few examples of entrepreneurs maybe within the Muslim community or famous entrepreneurs that people can think about, like as a high school, college student? You're like, okay, I'm trying to figure out, we said it's problem solving, creating a product and hopefully a company around that product or other products. You're helping solve problems. What are some famous examples that we can look to get an idea of entrepreneurs?
Yeah, I mean, within our community, as you know, we're a little bit shy away from entrepreneurship because of our cultural backgrounds. We usually tend to be from our upbringing is more structural, get a structural, career type job. But there are, a lot of examples of entrepreneurship. I mean, even an example, one of the founders of YouTube was a Muslim, Bangladeshi individual who helped YouTube, and those type of examples. I'll get, Shahid Khan, right? He is the wealthiest Pakistani Muslim in the United States. He was going to college engineering, and he was, working as a dishwasher. I believe at that time making less than $3 an hour at that time. And for him, he wanted to, he studied engineering, and he leveraged that into trying to figure out a way to better the supply chain for car mechanics or petrochemicals, so on and so forth. So there's a lot of up and coming entrepreneurs, not only in the United States, but globally. I'll give an example. Just the other day, we see what's going on with this pandemic. Supply chain completely dismembered throughout the world. This company in Pakistan called Airlift just raised $50 million with U.S. based venture capitalists, and they basically are trying to innovate the supply chain in Pakistan. So there's all these different, successful entrepreneurs, and what they do is at the ground level, find a problem, build a solution. That's your company.
Perfect. No, that's really helpful. And the other way I like to think about it is that an entrepreneur, you're not limited by one field. In accounting, you're kind of doing accounting stuff. As a doctor, you're doing doctor medical related things. Within entrepreneurship, it's so broad, you can do anything. As a CPA, if you open up your own accounting firm, you're an entrepreneur now. If you're a doctor, you open up your own medical office or a clinic or a series of clinics or a hospital, now you're an entrepreneur. It's taking that extra step of taking on the leadership, the ownership, and providing a good service or product to individual. That's another thing I want people to think about. It's not like, oh, this is a conceptual term that's out there. It's something very practical. We see it on a day-to-day basis, people working and trying to make a living with a good product service that potentially solves problems, hopefully.
Yeah, absolutely.
The other thing I wanted to talk about a little bit about is from an educational perspective. We always talk about, well, how do you become an entrepreneur educationally, right? Is there a specific career path? Many other fields, it's straightforward. You finish high school, you go to college, and college you major in a set series of majors that allows you to progress within that career. For entrepreneurship, is there anything like that? Can you major in entrepreneurship in college? Is that an option for people?
I think some colleges now are introducing entrepreneurship majors. I haven't, seen fully. I know for MBA programs, they do have entrepreneurship as a concentration. For example, NYU's MBA program, they offer like obviously you go for the masters in business administration, but you get to choose your concentration in finance, leadership, organization strategy, and entrepreneurship is one of them. So to answer your question in terms of is there any specifics like degree or skill set, I would say yes and no, because you can't if your mindset is becoming an entrepreneur, definitely getting those business skills is definitely needed. A lot of successful entrepreneurs usually say having basic accounting skills really knowing your balance sheets, your cash flow statements, your income statements, because keep in mind an entrepreneur and they need to be able to to make money and help grow the company and scale. So you need to know how to do your financials and analytics and be able to measure your growth your growth. Excuse me. So that's one area that maybe if somebody's becoming an entrepreneur, to learn those skills, learn those basic accounting skills, those basic financial skills. At the same time, however, entrepreneurs are very creative. That's one of the things when you think about entrepreneurs. They're out of the box thinkers. So you take some people that may have taken something like the arts or the liberal arts. They might be very successful entrepreneurs because or even I know successful entrepreneurs that study philosophy, and they count that philosophy because they study philosophy, it really helped their mind, because being an entrepreneur is a mindset and a lifestyle at the same time. You have to have both.
Oh, that's definitely good points. I would say I would agree with that, and I would say there's two aspects of it probably from my perspective. I would say yes, you can major in entrepreneurship, but most entrepreneurs don't major in entrepreneurship, right? You don't have to go to college and major in that. Most people might pick a specific skill set, something that they enjoy doing, something practical that they're learning, and then through entering that field, then eventually become an entrepreneur, or maybe do it right out of the bat. So a lot of people are like, oh, I want to become an entrepreneur. Some people might say, if you need to major in entrepreneurship, maybe entrepreneurship is not for you. I've heard some very critical people say things like that. So basically, when it comes to entrepreneurship, you want a basic background. Any business degree is helpful. An entrepreneurship degree definitely will help you in that direction, but they're not going to open a business for you, right? They're not going to take the steps of getting the funding for that business. You have to do all of that. So if your whole skill set is around just the logistics of opening a business, when it comes to opening the business, you're like, I just need a good product, I need a good service. And that becomes another problem for entrepreneurs sometimes, is getting that right product, getting that right service that solves a problem to start out with. So that was just something that I've seen in my own experience and I've heard that I wanted to share. The next thing I wanted to talk about is, we talked about the educational background. It varies. And then, are there any programs that you're familiar with that can help people get started if they're ready to open a business? They have a product, they have a service, they're ready to take the next step. Are there organizations that are out there that people can look to, or resources that people can look to?
Yes, absolutely. First, I'll talk about general, then I'll talk about specific the Muslim community. So in general, speaking, if you're in New York, every borough has an economic corporation, and they're allocated money by the government, and they have many mandates. One of their mandate is to help local businesses and startups. So, and they also have a lot of they also do, at least Queens, I think all of the boroughs do. It's a pitch competition. Right, so they actually allocate, I believe, Queens does it for 30,000 for whoever wins, their whole program, right? And what they help is, an entrepreneur, you need a business plan, you need financials, you need to know how to do your projections, you need to know how to create your legal documents, you need to know how to incorporate, you need to be able to, understand, scalability, you need to know how to create a pitch deck, and you need to know how to raise funds from investors or grants and other avenues. So, anybody who's watching this or, has questions, I would definitely suggest just going on Economic Development Corporation in their specific borough. So if it's Queens Economic Development Corporation, Bronx, check those out. They have a lot of free resources for that. Now, specifically for the Muslim community, that's something that, myself and others and, so Muslim youth mentors have been, very supportive of. We started Muslim Entrepreneur Association, MEA. SME is to cultivate, a global community of Muslim entrepreneurs and professionals. So, the resources we provide is anything, from mentoring, networking, to helping people, fine tune their business, get technology help to build a product, possibly, raise money for during this pandemic. Even last year, we threw our first ever, Muslim entrepreneur convention in Pennsylvania. So we actually had a startup pitch competition with Muslim startups. Something that, we're releasing next month is actually a virtual incubator that's going to house Muslim professionals and entrepreneurs to connect and collaborate on ideas. You mentioned resources and stuff. We actually created an entire library for free of resources and templates. You need a business plan, download it, use it. Financial, dashboard, download, use it. Balance sheet. So we have all this, and it's coming, inshallah, next month, and free for all of our Muslim community.
Perfect. Can you point us to a reference if somebody wants to know more information about those free resources you mentioned? Where can they locate? Is there a website? Is there a Facebook page or somewhere people can go for the resources you mentioned about within the different boroughs? Is it just a simple Google search? What would they Google?
So they would Google, depending on their borough, they would Google, like if they're in the Bronx, they would Google Bronx Economic Development Corporation. You would Google it, it would usually be the first link. And then you can always, you can set up, it's free. These services, these economic development corporations are run by the government to help you. So take advantage of it. So you can set up a free consultation, with these individuals. They're getting paid to help people like you start. Even if you just have an idea, even if it's not, fully conceptualized, so, you can make the appointments for free. And nowadays with the pandemic, you can even do it virtually. So you don't even have to leave your home. In terms of, the resources for the Muslim community that I was mentioning, I would say, join the MEA group, and, through MYM will release, everything next month for everybody to join.
Okay, perfect. And then I would mention, what about the Small Business Administration, the local chambers of commerce? Are those helpful resources that you found, your members have found, or people that you know who are entrepreneurs have found?
Yes. SBA, SBA not so much, but SBA is good for if you're trying to get like small business loans. So if you're trying to procure small business loans, SBA is definitely the way to go. Low interest rates, and they do have grants and those programs as well. So definitely, go to the website, see what grants and funding is available. For the Chambers of Commerce, is always I'm part of the Queens Chamber of Commerce. When I launched my first startup, Queens Chamber of Commerce was very helpful with my startup. They published us in their media, connected with some people, and they actually had their own startup competition where I actually got to connect with a few VCs. So tapping into your Chambers of Commerce is always key, and being part of that network. Each Chambers of Commerce is also similar to economic operation. The only difference is that Chambers of Commerce kind of does more so with like networking, like they have like somewhat of a different agenda, and and going to those networking events, speaking with people, you make a lot of connections. Yeah.
Great.
And this is all for you guys.
Great. And then I also noted that New York State has something called the Entrepreneurship Assistance Center. They said they provide instructions, training, technical support for people to become entrepreneurs. So that's another resource that I picked up on. I'm not sure how helpful that is compared to the other resources. And then I'm not sure if you're familiar with SCORE, the Service Corp of Retired Executives, but that's another organization that I've come across that's helpful. And basically it's a nonprofit organization. And these are people who are executive level at different companies like restaurants or banks or something like that. Now they're retired. So what they want to do is they want to mentor and give back. So they provide free consultations. They actually have centers, physical locations you can go to. You can meet with them, you can schedule an appointment, and they basically try to connect you with a mentor in that same field who's done it successfully. And it's all for free. So it's another way of getting free resources out there as well. So that's SCORE. And then if you use Google, there's a number of articles that come up like helpful resources. And then the quality of the resource varies. Like some are very helpful. I know people complain about the SBA. They're like, yeah, they're not really that helpful to me and my individual business. And it'll vary depending on how strong of a business plan you have, and the quality of the product, how scalable it is, all of those nuances come into play. And then your own skills, how far along you are. If you want somebody to hold your hand through every single step, some of these organizations won't do that for you. They want somebody who's ready to go, and others can help you on the basic baby steps and stuff like that. So it's a learning process. There's no one solution for everybody, from my experience. And then, are there any books?
Sorry, one more thing to add that you mentioned. There's also the New York Tech Council. So if your startup is, or your idea or whatever it is specifically like tech related, or you need tech assistance, New York Tech Council is also as well, and they do a lot of before the pandemic they're doing a lot of in-person events, but I'm sure as we post-pandemic they're going to do a lot of events, and those are really good networking events. You can meet a lot of people in technology, and
Yeah, and a number of these organizations probably, like you said, have networking events. So you can go to those events even if you have no idea what you're doing, and just meet people, learn from them, ask them questions, learn about that organization, and then that can help you grow as a professional and get closer to your goal of opening up your own business. In terms of like books that are out there that you've read that you found helpful, I've noted a few books that people usually call out: How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey, and then I think you like this book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. Are there any other books that you found that were helpful that entrepreneurs have used that kind of helped them get started?
Yes, absolutely. So 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel is a really good book. Peter Thiel is one of the PayPal. It's called what people call the PayPal mafia. So when Elon Musk started PayPal, everybody that were on the executive level, like Peter Thiel and others, when they left PayPal, they branched off and were able to, create their own, successful companies. Like the founder of Grubhub is a former, PayPal executive. Peter Thiel is a very successful VC and venture capital in San Francisco. And this book basically it talks mentality that entrepreneurs should have, and basically he scales startups either you're 0 or 1. 0 or 1. Either you're completely innovating and you're brand new, or you're not. And he talks about ways that you can scale your business to really differentiate from the competition. Because once you're in the industry in basic economics, once you're in a specific industry or you have a business model working, you're going to see competitors come up. And so he talks about all this, these strategies and everything. So I suggest, everybody to read it. You can even actually find the free PDF online. Just type 0 to 1 PDF. Another really good book that also talks about the entrepreneurial mindset, also about how to build your startup. It's called The Lean Startup. So the model is that a lot of times entrepreneurs, they spend a lot of money, time, and they get very emotionally and financially invested in a certain product or certain business model. The startup basically, tries to teach people that you should always be lean, meaning your product has to change with how the market goes. So you should always, it talks about building an MVP, a minimal viable product. Get it on the market. The market dictates where your product goes, not the way around. That's very important. The market dictates where your product goes. You may have a great idea, you may have a great solution to the problem, right? That you may think will be the best solution, and have all these features, and then you put it into, and people are not using your product. So you always have to be able to test, always be lean, always be willing to change. Your business model from when you first started your startup, 6 months later, 9 months later, a year later, 5 years later, it was always going to, you always have to be dynamic in this industry.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Abdul. I think those are definitely good books for people to check out. And again, it's you reading the book, implementing that. There's a lot of these books, sometimes people say, I don't have time to read a book. Sometimes you can find a summarized version of that book, the key points, articles. I've seen a lot of YouTube videos. People try to take the book and summarize it into a few points. Audible.
If you read it, I do. Audible.
Yeah, exactly. When you're commuting to work or working out or something like that, you can have the audio book on in the background. Definitely helpful. And then I wanted to jump into like maybe the pros and cons of being an entrepreneur. I know we could talk about entrepreneurship for like 2 hours to go into very, very detailed, but the purpose of this session, just to give basic people a high level background of entrepreneurship, how to approach the topic of entrepreneurship and think about what are the benefits, pros and negatives of entering that field of being your own boss, opening up your own business. So maybe let's talk about work-life flexibility and the hours. How does that, what are the benefits? What are the negatives entering entrepreneurship versus working for another company?
So I think it falls under the umbrella of security and risk, right? When you work for a company, the company takes care of you, right? Most of the times you're on salary, vacation days, you're getting paid. Sick days, you're getting paid. You know, you have your weekends off, holidays, summer Fridays. So you have the security, and like, as long as the company is, growing, it's doing good, you're getting a salary, you're getting a check every 2 weeks, right? As a that's not the case. There's, especially when you're first starting out, there's no vacation days, there's no summer Friday. Okay, I'm sick today, I don't have to work. No, if it's your startup, you're the leader, you're the boss. Your bills are dependent on your work. Unlike the other way around, where when you have you're working for a firm, everything is pretty much fixed, is structured. Entrepreneurship is those that are structured in terms of like the basic things you need to do, but actually scaling your business and building your company, it's not structured, especially if you're leading, if you're the CEO, if you're leading that. Also, as they say, high risk. When you're working for a company, there's low risk. If that company doesn't do good, okay, work for another company, go apply for another job, right? Entrepreneur, you're taking on very big risk. First of all, time and effort into it. Financials, you have to put in your own money and skin in the game. I have a lot of people that ask me, hey, how can I start a startup without putting my own funds in there? I'll say, if you have capital, and the first thing they'll ask you, how much money did you bootstrap into your company? And you say, well, I didn't really. Why should I believe in your company if you don't even believe enough to put your own money into it? So, that's another risk, financial risk. And the hours. I mean, you're putting in, it's every day, Monday through Friday. You're an entrepreneur. You're putting in those hours. Rather, you're working at a salary, a career job, salary job, weekend holidays, paid vacations, paid sick time. You don't have those benefits as an entrepreneur. So,
yeah, absolutely. And I think you summed it up very nicely. There's the risks and rewards, right? The rewards would include things like being your own boss, right? You don't have to listen to anybody, but then it comes down to you to execute and complete all the work. Then the other thing, some of the other benefits, like you mentioned, would be is it the financial payoff? People say like you have unlimited income growth opportunity. You have no idea how big your business can be, but probably varies by career. Most people have an idea, like if you open up a medical office, you open up a hotel, there's usually estimates of how much you can make, but you have more income opportunities than just being an employee making a set salary every single year, expecting a 3, 5, 10% pay increase over the years. It's really up to you to how much you can grow that business and how far you can take it. So many people will usually say you have a lot more income opportunities, but like you mentioned, there's also the downside if the business doesn't do well. And isn't there statistic like 60% of businesses or more or 80% fail within like the first 2 years? Have you heard like that?
Yeah, that's correct. And I think the problem is that entrepreneurship, there's high risk, high reward, and it's kind of I would say fantasized, if you will, like in our society where everybody's like, okay, I'm becoming an entrepreneur, I'm gonna make a lot of money, I'm gonna retire, have a yacht, mansion, all that. All entrepreneurs, all successful people will tell you, if you're an entrepreneur chasing money, it's a very slim chance that you'll become successful. Entrepreneurs become entrepreneurs to solve problems and add value, impact, a positive impact in community. Yeah, the money is a benefactor. However, your mindset should be, I'm getting in here, for the right reasons, and I'm going to see where it goes. You mentioned, some pros and stuff. I would say one of the main pros that I've, experienced as an entrepreneur, you really find yourself. Meaning, like, you really like when you're working a salary, like a more like structured job, you work up to a certain point to get a promotion, right? As an entrepreneur, you put 100% in, right? You have to put 100% in if you want to become successful, and you really find yourself in how far you can push yourself. And those things, like, some people go through reaching their full potential. An entrepreneur, being an entrepreneur in that mindset allows you to become close to actually see what is your full potential actually worth. And yeah, you mentioned, if you open up a doctor's office or, something of that nature, it would take time, but, eventually your own will be able to, to make more compensation off that. There are statistics on it. If you're like the other type of entrepreneur where you're launching a startup brand new, there's really no sticks or bars. You can do your financial analysis, seeing how big your market cap is, doing your market research, and how successful you can be based on your business model. But that shouldn't be what you should chase. What you should chase is scaling your startup day in, building it out. Learning doesn't work, pivoting. And I always tell one of the main skill sets that you need as an entrepreneur is being able to pivot. If you don't have that, it's going to be very hard entrepreneur or successful one.
Absolutely. One famous example that Dave Ramsey mentions is the founder of 7-Eleven. They basically said 7-Eleven was a business and all they really did was sell ice. When refrigerators came out, the owner had to figure out, what do I do with this business? It's not going to last. These ice boxes are going away. They can make their own ice. And they started up like a deli type system with whatever 7-Eleven has become now, the store. Sometimes they have gas stations attached to it. And that was all coming from, like you said, pivoting, right, the business and taking it to the next step, adjusting and learning from your mistakes. So that's a very, very important skill set. In terms of, we talked about no standard working hours. There's a risk of losing capital. The benefits being your own boss, having more work-life flexibility, especially when the business is more mature and ready. You can trust other people to take on some of that responsibility and to take a little bit of a step back sometimes here and there. And then I think the other things you mentioned where you don't have a set retirement plan, there's no 401k. You can open up a self-employed 401k, but there's nobody who's contributing half that amount of money or matching certain percentage of money you're putting in or giving you a pension. There's no pay. There's medical benefits you're getting. You have to buy your own medical insurance, right? And dental insurance, all those other types of insurance that your company was giving you, you're getting that yourself, right? More opportunities to earn income. But I think the other thing you mentioned was you learn a lot about yourself, especially if you're passionate about the product, the business that you get into. It can be really rewarding in many other ways other than just the dollar amounts. Are there any skills, ability, personality traits you found that successful entrepreneurs have compared to like the average person? Someone trying to figure out, would I make a good entrepreneur? Is there any guide that you can provide people to think about certain skill sets that they might be strengths that could help them become an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I mean, being able to handle stress and anxiety. I mean, entrepreneurship is a very stressful environment. So being able to handle and not crumble under pressure, things aren't going well. Always be optimistic and be able to say, no matter what, things are going to happen, and you're going to put your best foot forward. I would say the skills that kind of basic, hardworking, be able to organize. But one of the other things is that I remember Steve Jobs, mentioned this before. Being an entrepreneur, you have to be a very good talent scout, because you're not going to be able to build a company on your own. So you have to be able to find people with talent, sell them your idea, sell them your passion, and bring them over. Because you see all these successful companies out there, they were not, just not one person. It was a team. And then that global team became a global company. So you have to be able to find, this and be able to bring them with you, sell them your passion. And that's how your business or whatever can become successful.
Okay, perfect. So one of the skills that you said is passion, potentially, right? Are you passionate about this product? Are you willing to exercise that and act upon that? That can be one of the skill sets you can look for. If you're a person who's like, I just want to go into work, I want to do my job, I want to leave at 5 o'clock, I don't want to think about work, I want to enjoy the rest of my life. Entrepreneurship in the beginning is not going to be the right step for you because of how much commitment it requires, how much passion it requires. But everybody grows. Some people like to work the 9 to 5, and later on they're like, no, I'm passionate about something. I want to change. I want to open up my own business. And that passion, that drive can really make a big difference of whether your business is successful or not.
Yeah, absolutely.
I ran some statistics. So people always ask, what's the average pay like in this field? So entrepreneurship, it's very, very difficult to just come up with one number necessarily, but there isn't a website, ZIPPIA. And what they did is they came up with careers, average pay for entrepreneurships, and they even broke it out by state. but they came up with a number and they said on average, people who list themselves as entrepreneurs are earning about $74,000 per year. That's across the US. That's not just in like New York. New York, the figure would be higher. They said California, Washington, Oregon, Alaska, some of these states, the figures are much higher or higher. But on average, it's about 74,000. If you compare that to the average salary across the US, I think it's in the $30,000-$40,000 range. So they are earning on average more than the average American who's working. So that's just to give blind idea. It's not like you're automatically every entrepreneur is making $1 million a year, right?
Yeah.
And then with respect to other items related to being a Muslim in the field, is there anything unique that you found about that's beneficial for becoming uh, your own boss? And some people quote like, hey, the Prophet or some of the Sahabi. I'm not a scholar or anything. I can't quote specific of these, but some people point to like in the Muslim community, it's promoted to be your own boss, set your own rules, be able to take on that type of responsibility. Have you come across anything like that where people who are Muslims, it's like there are benefits to them and being diverse, being Muslim, to become your own boss, like being able to go to Jummah, being able to pray 5 times a day more easily, taking off time to go to Hajj? Are there anything like benefits like that for Muslims that you can share with us?
Yeah. So one thing is, as an entrepreneur, one of the main skill sets you need is discipline, right? You need to have a fine-tuned discipline. If you don't have that discipline, you're able to put in that hard work and be able to turn your passion into success. So, our religion, the Quran and everything, teaches you that discipline. You're going to pray 5 times a day. This is the time you're going to pray. These are set times. You're going to abstain from, X, Y, and Z. So what our religion is very unique in this case is that it provides that foundation, that discipline that can be directly transferable into those individuals who are trying to become entrepreneurs. Because a lot of people, when they start, they launch their company, they don't have that discipline, right? Friends might say, hey, let's go here, let's go there. And they might be like, okay, I'm not going to work on this. But as Muslims, we have that discipline. Our religion gives us that. And that is directly transferable to a successful entrepreneur.
Right. Thank you. And then for people, for like women, for sisters, for women, are there any benefits to becoming an entrepreneur? Sometimes we look at like work-life flexibility, being able to take off time to raise your kids. Are there any other benefits like that you can think of, linking back to some of the things that we mentioned before, something else that we haven't discussed that women might find beneficial for being their own boss?
Yeah, for them, creating their own schedule. A lot of like women entrepreneurs I know, they can work from home. So, if they have to take kids or the family or what have you, they're able to have their office and, also be able to do their work with kids instead of having like a career type where you have to go into the office, kids off with, parents or family or, get a babysitter. So that type of stuff definitely would help women. I've seen a definitely rise in Muslim entrepreneurs. So, there's more and more Muslim women that are looking into entrepreneurship, starting their own very successful companies and really helping and supporting each other. So I'm very proud of our Muslim sisters.
MashaAllah, thank you. And then in terms of other aspects of becoming an entrepreneur, can you share trends that you're seeing in the industry of people who are becoming entrepreneurs? Is it more everything all about tech, or are there still options for people to open up retail stores and be successful in that? We all hear like retail is dead. What are the statistics? What are the trends that you're seeing within entrepreneurship these days? Everybody I meet or hear, they're like, I'm going to have an app idea. I'm going to open up, create my own app. So what is that realistic? What are the trends out there? What are the practical steps people can take to research their idea?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, the app is an extension of your business. So anybody who says that, they're just going to create an app and, that's going to give them success, that's not true. What I think the mentality should be is that technology has taken over our lives in multiple aspects, right? So if you're launching a business or a startup, you're going to have some type of technology presence on that. So yes, you have to use technology to become successful. However, you know, in terms of just saying, okay, an app and that's going to be it. No, the app and the technology is an extension of your business. What problem you're trying to solve, what business you created, what business model you created, what operations are going, and then from there, you like technology to extend and provide your product. Now, in terms of trends, you mentioned that retail stores are dead. Some it depends on where. I mean, Amazon is opening up a few retail stores next year. So I don't think the trend is completely dead. It's all about innovation. How do you take what retail stores were before, and how do you innovate and make it better that people would actually. Now, in terms of what industries or what are some trends that are going? Pandemic that happened, a lot of remote startups have taken off. Think about Zoom that we're using right now, Remo, other like technology platforms that people to connect remotely. That industry is taking off, and we're going to definitely see an increase on that as well. Supply chain. I can't stress this enough. A lot of people are, they look at supply chain and they don't, they don't conceptualize that this is such a big industry. This pandemic really, supply chain, throughout the world, and a lot of successful companies, like I mentioned in Pakistan, they raised $58 million to improve the supply chain within that country. So that's a very, big industry. Even in the United States, trucking, there's startups that have raised hundreds of millions of dollars to improve the industry. In the next few years, I would say, anything that's, innovative in terms of technology using AI or, augmented reality, virtual reality, that's definitely a trend that's up and coming. Healthcare is still untapped niche in terms of entrepreneurship. We just created our first vaccine, that using mRNA, and we're going to see a lot of companies that are going to start experimenting with, create different, products or whatever to, cure different diseases. They're even talking using some type of mRNA to cure, Alzheimer's. So there's a lot of innovation happening in that field. And I would say logistics and, I think the last is, how do you connect people? How do you make the world smaller with people? Social isn't on one level, but there's other, startups that are raising capital that are making it even better.
No, that's helpful to kind of get a feel for what are the trends out there, where can people focus their attention. I would also say one of the advice one of my friends gave me, he said, people are always talking about these big companies, Amazon, Apple, and there's only going to be a handful of these companies that are going to be large. But if you look at many companies that are mid-sized companies, they're using hundreds of different types of software that you wouldn't even realize. It's not like everybody's just using Google Analytics for everything, Tableau for everything. There's so many niche things that there's room for, as long as you're helping companies make more money, deliver their product faster with higher quality customers. There's lots of room. Like the one you mentioned, what's his name? Shahid, who's from Pakistan. Shahid Khan, and he's the owner of like a NFL football team, the Jaguars, I believe.
Jacksonville Jaguars, yep.
He had a niche product basically, and his product was essentially like bumpers, right? So he found a more efficient way to use bumpers or repair them. You think of the size of like GM, Ford, these companies, you would think they were like, oh yeah, we're going to take over that business and run that ourselves. But he was able to provide a high quality product. They benefited from that product, and they used him instead of doing it themselves. And for many companies, outsourcing is a big thing. India became so powerful because of outsourcing, right? They were solving a problem for large corporations, lower cost, but the quality of the product needed to be high quality as well. Same thing with like physical manufacturing to China, right? So they provided a high quality product, good quality product, good manufacturing of the product efficiently, and then people are willing to wait for the shipping of the product to come over. So there's lots of like spaces within spaces, for people to open up their business too. It's not always like, oh, Apple's already opened up all the websites and has all the physical products. There's no room for any other software and stuff. And every time I meet professionals who are in the field, they're like, oh, we use hundreds of software. We use thousands of, like, why wouldn't you just use like Microsoft for everything or Google for everything? But they're like, no, there's very specific needs. And those companies don't provide a product at that high level of quality. We really need something like Zoom. One of the things that I noticed someone pointed out, they're like, what's special about Zoom? They're like, Skype has been around for 10, 15, 20 years, and Skype has been doing the same thing, video calls, right? They were the first ones that did high quality video calls for the public. But why was Zoom special? And right now, if you talk to many people who are working from home, somebody's using Microsoft Teams. Some people are using Zoom. Some people are using WebEx. So there's always room for competition as well. So sometimes people get discouraged, like, oh, somebody's already come up with a product. But if you can innovate that product, come up with a better product, don't feel like, there's no room for you to become an entrepreneur. So just my 2 cents on the topic.
Yeah, and I think that's a definitely great point. And I think as I mentioned, looking at supply chain of all these large companies, like, there's always ways that you can enter, innovate, and take over a portion of it.
Okay, perfect. So we have about 14 minutes left, and if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask any questions related to entrepreneurship, career-related questions, and we'll do our best to answer those questions. Please don't be shy. In the time we have left, is there anything else you want to talk about with respect to how people can get started entering this field, or any other pros and cons? I know you've been very involved in this area with the Muslim community. Is there anything else you want to share about MEA, what it is, how people can get involved with MEA, how they can learn more about entrepreneurship? I'll just turn it over to you for a few minutes.
Yes, thank you. So MEA, so when I first launched my first startup, I launched it in college at Queens College. The industry was construction. The problem was, my father's been a contractor for years. Speaking with my father one day, he told me that there's an influx of, contractors in the industry that are basically unlicensed, unprofessional, and giving construction a bad name. Speaking with people like my friends, older friends who were getting renovation done in their home, they have stories about dealing with different contractors. So one day I thought, okay, how do I create a solution to this? And, leveraging, technology in that avenue. When I started going to venture capitalists and started networking, I started seeing less and less of people like me, community from the same, background as me. So I thought about, okay, how do we connect some professional and entrepreneur communities so that, we can build our own ideas, we can fund our own startups. And that's where MEA came about, Muslim Entrepreneur Association. Our goal, as mentioned, is to create a group of Muslim entrepreneurs and professionals. We do everything from like workshops, career events. Anybody who wants to get involved, I'm sure, brothers, I hope you'll be able to post like the MEA group and people can go there, post their questions. And if you see in the group, like a lot of people are talking about different business, they're collaborating, they're, asking questions, providing answers. One thing, as I mentioned, we'll be releasing our virtual incubator, inshallah, next month, and that will really be an ecosystem of Muslim professionals and entrepreneurs, or just people, students, or just people with ideas in general, connect and collaborate and validate their idea and be able to raise funds. So, that's something that we'll be, releasing soon, and we do plan on doing another Muslim Entrepreneur Convention, end of September, early October. Those will come soon. Those are free for all of our members, but spots are limited. It's going to take place in Pennsylvania. The event, room, board, food, everything will be provided except transportation. So to come with that, I'll definitely share with Brother Zohib and the entire community. One thing I did want to mention is that something I learned, just a lesson. When you first launch a business, or remember, startup is like a marriage. Make sure you choose your partners wisely. A lot of times, greed gets involved, and what have you. Make sure everything is documented. Have your bylaws, have your dissolution agreement. That's very important. I feel like entrepreneurs, when they first create a company, they use your corporation NDAs. You get everything incorporated as a business, but you don't think about, okay, what happens when a partner leaves or the company doesn't work and like everybody's like fighting. So you need to create a dissolution agreement. Okay, what is the dissolution? If one person leaves, how do they exit? And that's very important to have it documented, notarized, because a lot of the time you see it with all the companies that I've started, there's been infighting with partners, and it's very hard because first of all, you're trying to start a company and yet you're fighting internally. So have these documents created, and it's not a bad thing to do because we're all people with different perspectives, objectives, and goals. And like if you bring partners, what if somebody has financial hardship and they're like, hey, I want to leave, I want my initial investment back. Well, your dissolution agreement has everything right then and there. What is owed to them, what will be given to them. I think that's very important that I don't think entrepreneurs early on really think about. But I learned from months. I definitely want to share that with everybody.
Absolutely. I would add to that also putting out the clear separation of duties when you're entering into a partnership with other people. So in the beginning, sometimes people are really good at the operations of the business. Other people are just providing the funding, right? So very, very clearly, you should segregate the duties of I'm going to be running the day-to-day business. I'm going to get a salary for my work, and I'm going to be managing these type of responsibilities. But when it comes to these types of decisions, I'll accept your input and stuff like that. But you don't get to make these decisions. Sometimes partners thinking, oh yeah, we're 50-50 on everything. And then the person who's a silent partner wants to start making changes to the regular business. The person's like, you don't know this business like I do. That's not going to work, and the other person gets upset because like, you're not accepting my feedback. It's not your business. It's our business, and you have a lot of infighting like this, and people perfectly good, successful business ends up getting destroyed because of these types of disputes. So the agreement that you mentioned, I personally know my uncles, they opened up, they had the franchise rights to Subway and in Charlotte, North Carolina. So within a good chunk of the city, they were the only ones that could open up a Subway, right? And that's another option within entrepreneurship is franchising, like, getting a franchise, opening up a McDonald's, Burger King, whatever that franchise is. And then they had one partner, and then they had a dispute. So they had to decide, well, we have 5 stores, 7 stores, 8 stores. How do we separate these stores? Like, do you get 3 of them? Well, that one makes more money than the other one, right? So in personal real life experience, I've seen this in action, and that's really, really good advice to have those type of that type of an agreement, and also discuss how we resolve disputes. So there's you and me have equal say in things. We disagree. What do we do next, right? Who's our arbitrator? Who's the middle person we're going to go to decide these things?
Yeah, absolutely. And you can include a lot of that in the bylaws. And something else I think that you mentioned was, when you start a company and it's a corporation with a C or S, you give equity to your partners. Right? A lot of times what happens is that entrepreneurs, you have 100% equity, you divide it evenly among your partners. That's a very bad thing to do, because eventually if you want to bring on VCs or what have you, they're going to be like, well, there's no more equity for us to take. I tell a lot of entrepreneurs, it's a very good model to do a sweat equity model. So you bring on your partners, right? And everybody in the beginning has, equal set, or depending if somebody funded more, you figure that out in the beginning, right? And then as the startup grows, it's basically everybody has to hit their own milestones and achieve, their tasks based on, what they're doing. If somebody's in operations, you have to hit X, Y, and Z, get a release of this, 5% of equity, right? So basically your equity grows the more you put into the company. So you're incentivized, hey, I'm part of the startup, I'm going to put in, I have 5 partners, I'm going to put in 100%, because if I do, I can get more equity. So that type of model is called sweat equity agreement. And when we release the virtual incubator, we'll have templates that people can download and learn more about it. But that's something that's very important, because you definitely want to incentivize to work, because if you're the only one working, why do you have 4 partners?
Absolutely. So, yeah. And then the other thing I would mention for people to think about is when they set up their business, think about how you're going to set up your business legally. Is it a partnership? Is it a C Corp? Is it an S Corp? Is it an LLC, LLP? All of those have their own risks and reward and nuances associated with it. So do a little bit of research, sit with someone who knows the topic before you decide on one model. One of the downsides for people who don't incorporate and don't have like partnership and enter into partnerships or sole proprietorships where it's just you and everything's under your name is all the liability risk associated with that business, that if anything goes wrong, somebody sues you. Or even with partnerships, people don't realize this. If you don't set it up under a legal structure, you and somebody else are running a business. Every mistake that person does, you become liable for that mistake. That person takes out a loan in the name of the business. That's your loan now also, because you're a partnership. That business has that loan now. So
Yeah.
be very careful in terms of who you partner with and how you set up those agreements, because there's been lots of examples of negative consequences. People don't think about these things and they just trust somebody. And there's a
Yeah.
famous, it's like, you don't know, and from Umar ibn al-Khattab, you don't know anybody until you've traveled with that person, until you've loaned that money and done business with that person. And even like some of the scholars out there, I've listened to their quotes and they've said things like, don't open up. Some people say, should I open up with somebody, a business with somebody in the masjid? He prays 5 times a day. I see him in the masjid all the time. He must be a good person, right? And there's risk associated with just trusting anybody you've just seen and smiles in the masjid, and then you have to deal with all the consequences of that. So somebody
Yeah.
pointed out, Amar mentioned opening up an LLC would potentially be a good way to go, and we agree, like limited liability is a great way to limited liability arrangements are great, but talk to a specialist, talk to somebody who knows. Sometimes accountants will say, I can do it for you. Like, I'm an accountant, I do taxes, but I do this on the side. I know how to file the paperwork with the state to get incorporated. And they're not going to explain to you all the nuances of the different
Yeah.
types of arrangements that are out
Yeah.
there.
A lot of people
Hopefully,
can go on like LegalZoom and check those things. One thing I want to add is that those people that are looking to raise capital specifically from a venture capitalist, right? Venture capitalists are angel investors. Venture capitalists and angel investors only invest in C corporations. The reason is that S corporations, you're limited to shares, and LLCs, the taxes get very complicated for individual investors. So that's something I want to add as well.
perfect. And then we're at a 3-minute check. So we have 3 minutes left. Again, if anybody's been holding off any questions, here's the time to ask them. So I think 2 things that we started discussing at the end is liability aspect of opening up a business, legal structure of the business, and then taxation of the business. All of those are key nuances. You really want to sit with a professional. You want to do your research, understand all of that before you go out and fill and start filing this paperwork, make everything official. And even people who have their own business, they have to decide, do you want to be a contractor? Do you want to get equity distributions out of it? Or do you want to get a dividend out of your business? All those nuances can have a significant impact on your taxes. And so speaking with the tax professional is important. So somebody was asking, what industry are we in? So I'm a CPA, I'm an accountant. I work a government job, but I helped other people with their businesses, family members and whatnot. So that's kind of my background. And Abdul, Abdul explained his background at the beginning of the video, but he's involved with MEA, and they help Muslims become entrepreneurs and provide resources and advice. And one of the items he mentioned was a virtual incubator program they're coming out with. And I believe you guys also have a Facebook page and like a website or something that people can visit to learn more about your organization.
Yeah, we have a Facebook group, and a Facebook page and a website as well that people can get involved with and reach out.
We have 2 minutes left. Anything, any closing remarks or anything you want people to know about or think about as they approach their next steps in entrepreneurship?
I would say just always be optimistic, always be ready to change. That you only live once, might as well live your full potential. You don't want to come to the end of life saying, "Man, I wish I did this. I wish I did that." So yeah, take that risk and see where it goes. Life is full of risk. You might as well risk on yourself and your own abilities than anything else. So yeah.
Perfect. So my closing thoughts are, I want to thank everybody for joining us today. I want to thank you, Abdul, thank Masjid Hamza, and thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for allowing us to have this event. And then we do this event every 2 weeks, bi-weekly. So please join us in 2 weeks for our next topic, next speaker. And then the other thing I want to remind everybody is that on the 28th, so next Saturday, not tomorrow, next Saturday, between 2 to 5 p.m., we're having a in-person event at Masjid Hamza. And the event is going to be a networking event / LinkedIn event. So we're going to learn about tips to improve your LinkedIn profile. We're going to cover resume tips, networking tips, how to make the most out of your network. And then Abdul's going to be one of our guest speakers for that event as well. And the other thing I wanted to mention is we will be providing free free headshots, professional headshots. We're having a professional photographer come in and provide you free headshots. You're going to get the copy of the headshots electronically. And I think you can even get like one free adjustment with that photographer and the deal that we worked out. So it's really, really nice to have a good professional picture for your job applications, for your email, for your LinkedIn profile as you're applying for jobs and just interacting professionally. So we're offering that as a free resource next week. The poster is up. So please join us. It's in person at Masjid Hamza. And then Amar is asking the link for MEA. If you just go to like Facebook and you search MEA Muslim Entrepreneur Association, it's probably going to be the first group that pops up. So that's it. I think we're at 7 o'clock. We've covered a full hour. And again, thank you everybody for joining us. And if you have any questions, you can always email us muslimyouthmentors@gmail.com. And if anybody wants to connect with Abdul, learn more about MEA, learn more about some of the free resources he has available, we can connect you guys as well. And then you can also follow us on Muslim Youth Mentors. We usually share some of the events that they're doing as well. So thank you everybody for joining us. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you.
Thank you.